28 hours. That is how long the most famous painting on Earth sat missing from the Louvre before one single human being noticed it was gone. A man walked into the museum in August of 1911 wearing a worker's smock, lifted the Mona Lisa off 4 iron pegs, wrapped it in cloth, and walked out a side door. And for more than a full day, the most protected building in France did not register the absence. Because before the theft, almost nobody cared about that painting. Art students walked past it. Tourists ignored it. It hung there, present, available, visible every single day, and its presence made it invisible. Then it vanished. And the strangest thing in the history of art happened. Crowds started forming at the Louvre. Bigger crowds than the painting had ever drawn in its life. They lined up for hours, shuffled through the Salon Carré, and stood in silence staring at 4 iron pegs and a rectangle of slightly less faded wallpaper. They came to look at nothing. They wept in front of a gap. Newspapers across the planet ran the empty wall on their front pages, and a portrait that had been furniture for 400 years became the most desired object in the world, not because it changed, but because it left. That is the entire mechanism you clicked on this video to learn, and it took the painting 2 years of absence to do what 4 centuries of presence never could. The human mind does not assign value to what is in front of it. It assigns value to what was in front of it and is no longer there. And if you understand why, really understand it, down at the level of how memory and desire actually operate, you will stop begging to be seen by people who only have eyes for empty walls. Because you have been the painting on the wall. You know exactly what that feels like, even if you have never put words on it. You were the one who answered within seconds while they took 6 hours and came back with 2 words. You were the one who remembered their interview, their mother's surgery, the name of their childhood dog, and they could not remember what you told them last Tuesday. There was a specific evening, and you know which one, when you were typing out a long message to someone and you stopped mid-sentence and thought, "They have never once written me anything this long." And then you sent it anyway. That was the moment you should have studied. That was the wall telling you it did not see the painting anymore. Somewhere along the way, you were taught that being consistent is a virtue. Show up. Be reliable. Be there. And in a room full of decent people, it is a virtue. But you did not apply it in a room full of decent people. You applied it to someone who was quietly running the math on you, and the math said this one is always here, this one costs nothing, this one requires no maintenance. Your consistency did not read as love to them. It read as a guarantee. And nobody in the history of the species has ever lain awake at 3 in the morning thinking about a guarantee. Your reliability was the exact mechanism that erased you. That is a brutal thing to hear, and it is still cheaper than the years you were about to spend proving it. Now the mechanism itself, because this channel does not deal in vibes, it deals in machinery. In the 1920s, a young psychologist named Bluma Zygarnik was sitting in a cafe when her professor pointed out something odd about the waiters. A waiter could hold an entire table's order in his head, every dish, every drink, every modification, with no notepad, flawlessly, for as long as the bill remained unpaid. The moment the table settled up and left, ask him what they ordered, and he would look at you blankly. The order was gone. Not faded. Gone. Zygarnik took that observation into a laboratory, interrupted people halfway through tasks, and found they remembered the unfinished tasks roughly twice as well as the finished ones. The mind, she discovered, holds open loops under tension. It grips what is incomplete. And the second something closes, the brain deletes it to make room, because a closed loop is dead weight. Read that again through the lens of your own life. When you explain yourself completely, you close the loop. When you answer instantly, you close the loop. When you are fully available, fully transparent, fully accounted for, you are a paid bill. The brain of the person across from you files you underfinished and moves its tension somewhere else. You thought honesty and openness would make you unforgettable. Neurologically, you were formatting yourself for deletion. The person who disappears correctly does the opposite. They become the unpaid tab, the interrupted task, the sentence that cut off in the middle. And the mind of whoever they left behind does not get a say in the matter, because this is not a decision people make, it is a compulsion that runs underneath decisions. The loop sits open, and it itches. That is why the word for what you want to create is obsession and not affection. Affection is voluntary. Obsession is a loop. The brain cannot close on its own. So here is how disappearing actually works, and pay attention to what it is not, because most people who try this get it completely wrong. Disappearing is not a dramatic exit. The long goodbye message, the announcement that you need space, the pointed silence you make sure they notice, all of that is theater. And theater is still a request for attention. The moment you announce your absence, you have handed them the closure that kills it. You told them the tab is being closed. No. Real disappearance is a contraction with no press release. Your replies get shorter without getting colder. Your availability thins. You stop volunteering information about where you were, who you were with, how you felt about it. Questions that used to get paragraphs now get a sentence, delivered warmly, and then nothing. You do not leave the room. You just take most of yourself out of it and let them notice on their own schedule. And they will notice because the brain is exquisitely tuned to detect a pattern breaking. It ignores the pattern itself for years. It cannot ignore the break. And once the contraction is underway, the timing of your reappearances becomes the weapon. A researcher named Skinner put pigeons in boxes and taught the world something it still refuses to apply to its own love life. When a lever produced food every single time, the pigeons pressed it calmly, casually, only when hungry. When the lever produced food at random, sometimes on the first press, sometimes on the 40th, the birds lost their minds. They pressed for hours. They pressed until their beaks wore down. Predictable reward creates comfort. Unpredictable reward creates compulsion, and every casino on the planet is a monument to that one sentence. You, replying instantly every time, were the lever that always pays. Comfortable. Ignorable. Ignorable. The person who resurfaces warmly, brilliantly, and then recedes again with no pattern anyone can chart. That person is the slot machine. And the poor bastard on the other end does not even understand why they keep pulling. It is not romance. It has never been romance. It is a nervous system doing what nervous systems do when the payout schedule goes random. There is a second law operating underneath the first, and a man who lived 27 centuries ago understood it better than any psychologist alive. Herodotus tells the story of Deioces, a Mede, back when the Medes were scattered villages with no king and no law. Deioces wanted absolute power, and he was smart enough to know you cannot ask for it, so he became a judge. The fairest, most incorruptible judge anyone had ever seen. People traveled from other villages just to have him settle their disputes, and once the entire region depended on him, he did the thing nobody saw coming. He quit, said the work took too much of his time and gave him nothing. He went home and closed his door, and the villages fell apart. Theft, feuds, chaos, until the Medes gathered in an assembly and decided the only solution was to beg this man to rule them. He made them build the begging into architecture, a fortress city called Ecbatana, 7 walls, one inside the other, and his palace at the center. Then he issued the decree that tells you he understood human nature to the bone. No one sees the king. All business through messengers. Because Deioces knew the men around him had grown up with him, and he knew that if they saw him daily, they would see a man, and men can be resented, compared, replaced. Unseen, he became a different kind of being. He ruled for 53 years, and the men who could have taken his throne any given afternoon spent 5 decades in awe of a door. He starved them of himself until their imagination did his ruling for him. And that is the part of the machinery almost nobody talks about. When you are absent and unexplained, people do not think about the real you. They think about the version of you. Their own mind builds to fill the silence, and the mind builds that version out of longing, out of guilt, out of the best memories, out of the fear of what you might be doing now. You could not write yourself a better publicist than another person's imagination, and the only fee it charges is your silence. Every time you explain where you were, you fire that publicist and replace him with the truth. And the truth about anyone's Tuesday is boring as hell. And when the break in the pattern finally registers, they will test it. Count on this. A message will arrive, light on the surface, casual by design, something like a meme or a question they could have answered themselves, or the classic, "You have been quiet lately." Understand what that message is. It is not affection. It is a diagnostic. They are pressing the lever to see if the machine still pays, and everything hinges on what you do in the next 30 seconds. The old, you would have arrived like a golden retriever, grateful, thorough, offering a full accounting of the silence as if silence were a crime that required a defense. The new you answers warmly and answers nothing. Been busy. Good things. How are you? 7 words, no wound in them, no coldness anyone could point to, and no information whatsoever. Coldness they could dismiss as a tantrum. Warmth with no access, the mind cannot file that anywhere, so it keeps the folder open on the desk. You are not punishing them. Punishment is legible. You are simply no longer explaining yourself, and to someone who used to receive the full transcript of your inner life on demand, that unexplained warmth is louder than any silence you could ever perform. Scarcity finishes the job. In the 1970s, researchers ran an experiment so simple it is almost embarrassing. Same cookies, 2 jars. One jar held 10, the other held 2. People rated the cookies from the nearly empty jar as better. Same recipe, same batch. The rating changed because the availability changed, and the effect got even stronger when people watched a full jar become an empty one. Understand what that means. Nothing about you has to improve for your value to multiply. The jar just has to stop being full. You spent all that time trying to be a better cookie for someone who never once looked at the cookie. They were looking at the jar. And now, the part of this video you are not going to like, because around this point you have been nodding along, collecting ammunition, imagining a specific face on the receiving end of all this. So let me say what is actually happening. You did not search for this video because you have someone obsessing over you. You searched for it because you are the one obsessing. You are the waiter with the unpaid tab, except the tab is a person. You know their last seen down to the minute. You have opened their profile so many times, your thumb does it without your permission. You have written messages and deleted them, and told yourself deleting them was strength when the writing was the confession. Somebody ran this exact playbook on you, probably without ever reading a word of psychology, and it worked so completely that you typed how to make them obsess over me into a search bar. You are not here to learn the technique. You are here because you are inside it, looking for the exit, and the exit was labeled revenge, because revenge is easier to admit than hurt. There was even a moment, watch how specific this gets, when they finally did reply after days of nothing. And you felt a wave of relief so physical it embarrassed you, and you replied, fast, too fast, and hated yourself a little while. Your thumbs were still moving. That relief was not love. That was a pigeon getting a pellet. And some part of you knew it even then, which is why you never told anyone how good that one message felt. That does not make the mechanism less real. It makes it more real, because you are the proof. But it changes what you should do with it, and this is where the whole thing turns, so stay with me. If you disappear from someone's life and then spend your absence checking whether they noticed, you did not disappear. You just moved the surveillance to your side of the glass. The loop is still open. It is just open in your head now. And an open loop in your head while you perform being gone is not power. It is the same obsession wearing a costume. Obsess did not sit behind his 7 walls refreshing to see if the villagers missed him. He built a damn kingdom in there. The absence radiated power because there was something happening inside it. An empty room behind a closed door impresses no one for long. Eventually, someone opens the door, and if all they find is a man staring at the door from the inside, waiting, the spell dies in a single look. So the real instruction is uglier and simpler than the title of this video promised you. Withdraw the access. Cut the explanations. Let your absence open the loop in their head, and it will. The machinery does not care about anyone's feelings. It runs on tension, and it will run on yours or on theirs. But while that loop tightens in their mind, your work is to close the one in your own. Fill the fortress, the skill, the money, the body, the room they have never seen. Because there are 2 kinds of people who vanish. The first vanishes at someone. Every silent day is aimed, measured, performed, and secretly scored by whether it landed. The second vanishes towards something and stops keeping score. And this is the cruel elegance of it. The second kind is the only kind. The mechanism fully rewards. The obsession you cause is exactly proportional to the obsession you no longer feel. They can smell the difference through a screen, through a closed door, through 7 walls. Everyone can. The Mona Lisa did not change in those 2 years. It was gone. Same wood panel, same paint, same tired smile, wrapped in cloth in the false bottom of a trunk in a workman's 1-room apartment. Every ounce of the transformation happened in the crowd, and the people lined up to grieve at a blank wall, building a masterpiece in their heads that no painting could ever be. And when it came back, they hung it behind glass and guards, and 100 years later, thousands of people a day fight through a crowd for 30 seconds in front of it, most of them a little disappointed, and none of them able to admit it. They are not looking at a painting. They are looking at the memory of an empty wall. People do not obsess over what you are. They obsess over the space where you used to be. So the question was never how to disappear from their mind. You disappear from the wall. What grows in their mind after that was never yours to control. And the ones who understand this stop checking. And the ones who stop checking are the only ones it ever truly works for. Subscribing to this channel is not support. It is a decision about which version of you walks into the next room. So make it or do not. The machinery runs either way. If somewhere in the last few minutes you recognized your own thumb, your own 3 in the morning, your own blank wall, type empty frame in the comments, and the people who type it back will know exactly which minute of this video put it there. And when you are done here, watch the video on why explaining yourself is handing out ammunition, because disappearing is only the second move. The first is learning to shut your mouth while you are still in the room,